The sky was black, full of angry clouds, and lightning danced across the stars like it wanted to burn the world below. A ship, once clean and bright, now shook violently as it fell toward the surface of a deserted planet. Inside, Captain Alara held the controls tightly, her hands bleeding, alarms screaming in her ears. She had no time to think, only to react. The navigation system was dead, the engines were gone, and fire crawled through the wires behind her seat. "Brace for impact," she whispered, though no one was there to hear her. The ship hit the ground with a roar, metal twisting, glass shattering, and the whole world going dark. When Alara opened her eyes, she tasted blood in her mouth. Smoke filled the air, and everything was quiet except for the crackling of fire. Her head throbbed, but she was alive, barely. Her ship was a wreck, broken in half like a toy. She unbuckled herself and crawled out, coughing and gasping. Her suit was torn, her face bruised, but she was breathing. She looked around. The planet was dry. The sky orange with dust, red rocks stretched far in every direction. And nothing moved. No trees, no animals, no sound. No sound, just wind and silence. It was like being on the surface of a forgotten world. Alara grabbed her emergency pack and a scanner. She had to check for other survivors, even though she already knew the truth. She was the only one who made it. Her ship's crew was gone, lost in the flames or scattered across the rocks. She swallowed hard and forced herself to keep walking. The scanner blinked, showing a strange signal nearby, not human. She narrowed her eyes and followed it, slowly and carefully. Her boots crunched over dry soil, and her heart beat fast. She wasn't alone on this planet. A few hundred meters away, she saw something. Another crash site, not human-made. The design was sharp, smooth, and unfamiliar. Black metal pieces lay broken like bones across the sand, and in the center, something moved. Alara raised her weapon, her hands shaking. She didn't know what to expect, but what she saw next made her freeze. An alien tall, with gray-blue skin, long arms, and golden eyes. He was injured, bleeding from the side, but alive. He looked at her, and for a long moment, neither moved. He groaned and sat up slowly. His expression was not angry, not scared, just tired. Alara didn't lower her weapon, but she didn't shoot either. She understood something without words. He was stranded too, and just like her. He had no backup, no ship, no way off this world. They stared at each other as the wind howled between them. Then the alien made a sound, a word maybe, or a name. She didn't understand it, but his tone wasn't threatening. He pointed at the sky, then at the wreckage, and finally at her. She nodded slowly, guessing what he meant. They were both victims of the storm. A sudden loud screech broke the moment. Something was coming, fast, from behind the rocks. A sand beast crawled out huge, with 6 legs and sharp jaws. Alara turned to shoot, but it was too fast. The beast leaped toward her. Roaring before she could scream, the alien moved. In a blur, he jumped between her and the creature. Swinging a piece of metal like a sword, he slashed the beast across the face. And it screamed, running back into the rocks. Alara stood frozen, her mouth open. The alien looked back at her, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm. Alara slowly lowered her weapon. The message was clear. He could have let her die, but he didn't. He saved her. That night, they sat under the stars, not speaking, but not fighting either. They shared a fire made from wreckage, and each stayed on opposite sides, watching each other closely. The air was cold, but the fire was warm, and for a moment, Alara didn't feel so alone. She didn't know his name, his planet, or if his people were friends or enemies. But she knew one thing: on this dead planet, he was the only other living soul. And maybe, just maybe, they had a better chance together than apart. As the 2 moons rose above the cliffs, Alara looked at the alien across the fire and whispered to herself, "What now?" The alien looked at her, tilted his head, and softly echoed the same sound back. "What now?" The morning light was pale and strange, casting long shadows across the rocky ground. Alara opened her eyes slowly. Feeling the pain in her back and legs from sleeping on hard stone, the fire had turned to cold ash, and the alien was already awake. Standing near the edge of the cliff, watching the horizon, his skin glowed faintly under the sunlight, and his movements were quiet, controlled. Alara sat up, brushing dirt off her arms. Her stomach growled, reminding her they had no food left. She pulled out her scanner and tried to check for any nearby sources of water or energy, but the screen showed nothing helpful, just weak signals and unknown minerals. She looked at the alien, wondering if he had any plan at all. He glanced back at her but said nothing. Instead, he pointed toward the hills, then started walking. Alara sighed, grabbed her gear, and followed him, not because she trusted him, but because she didn't have another choice. The planet was cruel. Dry winds cut across their faces and dust filled their mouths. Every step was heavy, but they kept moving, looking for shelter, food, or even a sign of life. Hours passed, and the sun grew hotter. Alara felt dizzy and weak, her throat dry. The alien noticed her slowing down and stopped. He reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out a strange root, breaking it in half and handing her a piece. She stared at it, unsure, but then took a small bite. It was bitter, but it gave her a little strength. They walked in silence, side by side. Still strangers, but no longer enemies. When they reached a ridge, Alara saw something below a green patch, maybe plants, maybe water. She gasped and looked at the alien. He nodded once, and they both rushed down the slope. Their hope turned to relief when they found a small stream flowing from between two rocks. It wasn't much, but it was real. They drank quickly, laughing for the first time, and Alara dipped her face into the cold water, forgetting for a moment that they were stranded. After resting, they used parts from the alien wreckage to build a better shelter near the water. It was nothing fancy, just metal plates and thermal cloth stretched between rocks. But it was safe and hidden. At night, Alara sat near the fire and watched the stars. The alien sat across from her, sharpening a long stick with a rock. She realized she didn't even know his name. She pointed at herself and said, "Alara," then pointed at him. He blinked, then said something she didn't understand, but repeated it again, slower, "Vale." She smiled slightly and nodded. "Vale." He nodded back, then made a motion with his hand, like two fingers walking, and pointed at her again. She understood he wanted to know where she was going before the crash. She picked up a stick and drew a simple star map in the dirt, pointing to a circle and saying, "Earth." He tilted his head, then drew a different shape, a swirling sun, and said a name she couldn't repeat. It was his home, far away, now unreachable. Just like hers, that night, loud footsteps echoed in the dark. Alara grabbed her weapon and stood up. Vale stood too. Holding his sharpened stick, something moved between the rocks, fast and heavy. A strange beast, like a mix between a bear and a lizard, appeared, sniffing the air. Alara raised her gun, but before she could shoot, Vale threw his spear, hitting the creature in the neck. It screamed and fell, twitching in the dirt. They stood there, breathing hard, covered in sweat. Alara looked at Vale and said, "Thanks," and this time, she meant it. The next day, they cut the beast open carefully and used its meat for food. They cooked it over the fire, the smell strong and strange. But they ate it, laughing quietly. The fear between them had started to melt. Not completely, but enough. They began to build more things together. A wall around their camp, small traps for food, and even a signal tower made from metal scraps and a broken beacon. Every day was hard, but every night they survived was a small victory. One evening, Alara sat on a rock, watching Vale fix part of the shelter roof. He was stronger. Then he looked, and surprisingly patient. She wondered how long they could live like this. Weeks? Months? Forever? She didn't know, but deep inside her, something had changed. She no longer thought of Vale as a threat. She saw him as a partner. Someone who had saved her life more than once. Someone who had no reason to help her, but did anyway. She didn't say these things out loud. She just watched him as he worked, and when he looked back at her, she smiled softly. For the first time since the crash, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone. The wind changed that night. Colder than before, it howled through the rocks like a voice whispering secrets in a forgotten tongue. Alara couldn't sleep. She sat up, wrapped in a thermal blanket, and listened. Something felt wrong, not like danger, but different, like the planet itself was watching. Vale was already awake, sitting by the fire with his golden eyes fixed on the dark cliffs beyond their camp. He didn't move or speak, just stared as if he expected something to arrive. Alara got up and walked to him slowly. He looked at her and pointed toward the eastern ridge. There, barely visible in the night, was a glowing blue light. It pulsed softly, steady like a heartbeat. Alara had never seen it before. She looked. At her scanner it was picking up something too, an unknown energy source. Not far from their location, she showed it to Vale, and he nodded. They would go at sunrise. When the first light broke over the jagged hills, they packed what they needed: water, a few tools, and weapons. The air was dry, and the dust clung to their boots as they climbed. Every step felt heavier than usual, as if the planet didn't want them to reach whatever lay ahead. After 2 hours, they arrived at a narrow gap between two giant rocks, and just beyond it, a hidden valley opened up. At the center of the valley was something strange, a structure, not natural, not human, and not Vale's technology either. It was a smooth black dome, half buried in the ground, with lines glowing faintly across its surface. Alara approached carefully. Touching the wall, it was cold, but hummed under her fingers like it was alive. Vale walked around the side and found an entrance and archway carved into the stone with alien symbols floating in midair. They stepped inside, and the world changed. The dome was bigger on the inside, full of glowing lights, tall pillars, and floating shapes that moved without touching anything. The air was warmer, softer, and it smelled like something ancient. Alara's heart raced. She had never seen anything like it. Not even in the most advanced human stations. Vale seemed tense too, like he recognized something but didn't want to believe it. At the center of the chamber was a large crystal floating above a stone base. It glowed with the same blue light they saw from the cliffs, and as they moved closer, the crystal reacted. Rising higher and spinning slowly, Alara's scanner started beeping wildly, flashing red and green at the same time. The data made no sense, showed unknown code, impossible heat signatures, and a strange reading coming from her own body. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the crystal and hit Alara in the chest. She screamed and dropped to her knees. Her skin tingled, her vision blurred, and her mind filled with images: stars, planets, creatures she didn't know, languages she didn't speak. Vale ran to her, pulling her back from the beam. The light stopped, and the crystal floated gently down again, silent and still. Alara was breathing hard, her hands shaking. She looked at Vale, confused, scared, and asked, "What was that?" He didn't answer, but slowly touched her forehead with his fingers. Then he looked into her eyes and said something she understood without needing a translator. "The relic has chosen you." They left the dome and returned to their camp without speaking. That night, Alara sat near the fire, staring at her hands. Her skin looked normal, but she felt different. like something deep inside her had been unlocked. She could hear distant sounds more clearly, smell things from far away, and when she looked at the stars, she somehow knew where certain planets were. She didn't tell Vale all of it, but he saw the change too. The next day, her body began to ache, not with pain, but with pressure, like it was adjusting. She didn't understand it, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Something was guiding her now. Maybe the relic, maybe the planet itself. She dreamed of the crystal that night, and in her dream, it spoke to her in flashes of light and feeling. It showed her a future not clear, but full of life, and, at the center of it, she stood with Vale beside her, and something small in her arms, something alive. When she woke up, Vale was already watching her. He stepped closer and gently placed his hand on her stomach. Alara stared at him, heart pounding, and asked, "How do you know?" He answered softly, one word only, but enough: heartbeat. She didn't know how it was possible. She didn't even know if it was real. But deep inside her, she already felt it, something growing, something new. And in that moment, surrounded by alien stars on a forgotten planet, Alara knew their story was only just beginning. Alara sat on the edge of the small cliff behind their camp, staring at her hands as the wind passed through her hair. Below her, the land stretched wide and empty. But her mind was louder than ever. She placed a hand on her belly again, not because of pain, but because she felt something that wasn't there before, a gentle warmth, a strange pull, like something deep inside her had started to grow. She didn't understand it, and she didn't say anything to Vale. Not yet. Vale was quiet too, more than usual. He worked on building a larger wall around their shelter, not asking for help, not speaking unless she asked a question. She could feel a distance between them now, not coldness, but something heavy. Like he knew more than he was telling. Alara wanted to scream, to ask him what was happening to her. But every time she opened her mouth, no words came out. That night, the wind carried a sound they had never heard before. Not a beast, not a storm, but music, soft, distant, and calling. Alara stood and followed it without thinking, like her feet moved on their own. Vale called her name, but she kept walking. Her hands glowed faintly in the dark, and her skin felt alive, pulsing in rhythm with a strange melody. She reached a circle of glowing stones deep in the valley. Each stone was marked with symbols that moved like liquid light. In the center was a small pool of still water, shining bright under the moonlight. Alara stepped into the circle, her feet sinking into warm sand, and looked into the pool. At first, she saw only her own reflection, but then the surface changed. She saw herself holding a child, small, strong. With her eyes and Vale skin, she saw fire in the sky, warships landing, men and creatures shouting. She saw herself standing between them, arms out, voice rising above the chaos, and then the vision was gone. Just water again, still and quiet. Alara fell backward, breathing hard. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from knowing. She touched her stomach and whispered, "It's real." Vale arrived moments later. Panting and wide-eyed, he stepped into the circle, looked at her glowing hands, then at the pool. And something in his face changed. Not surprise, not fear, acceptance. He knelt beside her and spoke softly, telling her the truth. The relic inside the dome was part of a long-lost bioengineering system made by his ancestors. It was meant to save dying species, to create new life, not by forcing it, but by choosing those worthy of continuing the line. The relic had scanned both of them, seen their will to survive, their ability to protect, and had made them compatible. Alara listened, mouth dry. "So this wasn't an accident?" she asked. Vale shook his head. "No," he said. "It was a gift." Her mind swirled, thoughts crashing like waves. How could she raise a child here, on a dead world, with no people, no doctors, no future? But then she looked at Vale, who had protected her, shared food with her, saved her more times than she could count. He wasn't just a warrior or an alien anymore. He was the only one she trusted. The next days passed like a strange dream. Ilara began to feel stronger, faster. Even her hearing and sight were sharper. Vale stayed near her always, watching closely, guiding her through his healing traditions, using herbs and heat stones to keep her body balanced. Sometimes he sang in his native language, low and gentle. And even though she didn't understand the words, she felt peace in the sound one morning. Ilara woke to find the camp shaking, not from an earthquake, but from something in the sky. She ran outside and saw lights blinking far above the clouds, ships, several of them. Approaching the planet fast, she grabbed her scanner, but the signal was too weak to know who they were. Vale stood beside her, staring up in silence. "Do you think they're human?" she asked. He didn't answer, just clenched his jaw and turned back to the shelter. He began packing supplies quickly. Ilara felt panic rising in her chest. "What are you doing?" she asked. "If they come," he said slowly, "they will not come for peace." Ilara touched her stomach, feeling a flutter that was not hers alone. She looked at the sky and felt a storm coming, but not the kind with rain or thunder. This was the kind with soldiers. Greed and fear. She had to be ready, not just for herself, but for the life inside her, and this time she would not run. The ships in the sky didn't come quietly. They dropped fast, their engines burning holes into the clouds. Ilara stood with her hand over her belly, watching the glow grow bigger each second. Vale stood beside her, his weapon ready, but even he looked uncertain. These weren't scavengers or lost explorers. These were organized, clean, and moving with purpose by nightfall. One of the ships had landed far beyond the mountains, out of direct view, but close enough that the ground still trembled beneath their feet. Ilara didn't sleep. She couldn't. She lay awake, one hand gripping a metal bar, the other resting over her growing belly. The heartbeat inside her was steady, calm, and somehow that gave her strength. Vale left at dawn to scout the area. Ilara waited in silence, counting every breath, every gust of wind, hoping he'd return soon. When he finally did, he looked grim. He had seen armored figures, humanoid in shape, but not fully human, with glowing blue eyes and strange weapons. They had set up scanners across the area, searching for energy signatures. They weren't here to help. They were here to take. Ilara looked at her scanner and noticed something she hadn't seen before. The relic signaled the one from the alien dome was still active, but weaker now. Like it was fading, she realized the other ships might be tracking that same signal, drawn by its power, or maybe by something else, something inside her. Later that day, they heard movement. Not ships this time, but footsteps, heavy and organized. Ilara and Vale hid in the narrow cave behind their shelter. Crouched together as shadows passed above them, she could hear voices, not human, not alien, but translated through tech cold and empty. This zone matches the biorhythm. One voice said, "Scan for the carrier." Ilara's blood froze. They weren't looking for survivors. They were looking for her. The footsteps moved closer, and then stopped just above them. Vale's hand rested on his blade, but he didn't move. Ilara didn't breathe. Her child kicked inside her, a tiny movement that made her heart beat faster. Just when it felt like the soldiers would find them, a loud signal echoed through the valley, one of their own ships calling them back. The soldiers turned, speaking quickly in a code she didn't understand, then moved away, boots crunching over stone. Ilara leaned back, gasping quietly. When it was safe, they came out and looked toward the hills. In the distance, Ilara saw the lights of a base being built, tall towers rising fast, drones flying like insects, and tents glowing under the sky. She looked at Vale, her voice shaking. "They're going to search the whole planet." Vale nodded. And when they find you, they will take the child, Elara. Felt something harden inside her. She had run before. She had survived storms and beasts. She had adapted. But this was different. This was war. And she wouldn't give up her child to machines and strangers who saw life as a science project. That night, she took a torch and walked alone to the dome. It was quieter now, dimmer, but still pulsing faintly. She placed her hand on the stone and whispered, "You chose me." The crystal rose again. Slowly and glowed faintly. A soft hum echoed through the chamber. Then, new light formed in the era map, showing a path deep underground, tunnels and hidden chambers leading far from the surface. Away from the signal range, Vale joined her. Moments later, and together, they followed the map. Deep into the planet's core, they moved through old halls carved by hands long gone. Walls lined with sleeping machines and silent statues. At the end of the path was a Rooma chamber full of stasis pods and protective fields. One pod still worked, dimly glowing, large enough for one adult and one child. Elara stared at it, understanding what it meant. If everything failed, if they were caught, she could place the child inside. She could protect her baby even if she couldn't save herself, but she didn't want to give up yet, not while she could. Still fight, they returned to the surface the next day and made a plan. Vale would lead any incoming patrols away, creating noise and distraction. Meanwhile, Elara would destroy the last signal source, making it harder for the soldiers to find them again before they split. Vale looked at her and touched her face gently, not like a soldier or a protector, but like something more. Elara didn't pull away. Her eyes met his, and in the silence between them, something passed, something deeper than words. He left without another sound, disappearing into the canyon. And Elara began walking toward the ridge with a scanner in one hand and a small explosive charge in the other. She looked up at the stars once more, thinking of Earth, of the life she'd lost, and the one growing inside her now. She wasn't just running anymore. She was defending, and for the first time she felt like a mother. The ridge was steep and the rocks sharp. But Elara didn't stop climbing. Her fingers were raw, her legs trembling. But every step was for her child. Behind her, the planet was quiet again. Too quiet, like it was waiting. At the top of the hill, she crouched behind a rusted metal structure from her wrecked ship. Still half buried in dirt, the scanner beeped. Slowly in her hand, the final signal booster was nearby, still broadcasting a faint trace of energy. She would destroy it now, and give her unborn child a few more days of safety. She moved quickly, setting the small explosive charge under the old panel. Her hands worked fast, trained, and precise. But her mind was spinning. Every part of her body felt heavier now, her balance a little off. Her child was growing faster than it should. Vale had warned her the relic's touch would speed up everything. Her pregnancy wasn't following Earth's time. It followed something alien. And that terrified her more than she could say. The charge blinked red, ready to ignite. Elara turned away and ran down the slope, covering her belly with her arms as the ground behind her shook. The explosion wasn't large, but it sent a cloud of dust high into the sky. That would be noticed, but it had to be done. The signal was gone now, and with it, the enemy's best chance to find her exact location. She reached the base of the hill, panting, her lungs burning, and stopped to drink from a small pouch of water. Then she heard something that made her freeze. A voice, not mechanical, not Vale's, but human. Distant, broken by static, coming through a speaker. Elara Kane. This is Commander Miles Grant of the Earth's Defense Corps. If you're alive, respond. Her eyes widened, her heart jumped. Earth, a human voice. After all this time, someone had come. She looked at her scanner again and saw a new signal. Weak, but real. About 10 kilometers north of her camp. Her legs wanted to run, but her mind hesitated. Why now? Why so suddenly? And how did they find Hershey returned to the camp at dusk? Her body aching and her thoughts full of questions. Vale hadn't come back yet, and that made her nervous. She waited. In silence, every second stretching longer. The fire crackled, and she stared into it without blinking. Then she heard footsteps, soft but heavy, not his usual pace. She grabbed her weapon and stepped outside of Vale, was limping, one arm bleeding badly, his armor scorched. He collapsed near the shelter, and Alara ran to him, catching his head before it hit the ground. He was alive, but barely. He opened his eyes and whispered, "They know. They know about the child." Alara's hands shook as she cleaned his wound and wrapped it tightly. She had nothing strong enough to heal it completely, but he would survive. She made him drink. Then sat close as he explained what happened. The enemy had drones, fast and quiet. They had spotted him and chased him through the canyon. He managed to destroy two, but one got away, carrying his image, his location, and more. "They'll be here soon," he said, "and they won't wait to talk." Alara sat back, holding her head, torn between two impossible paths. A human ship might be nearby someone who could take her home, give her child safety, but Vale was right. The ones who had chased them weren't here to rescue. They were here to claim something valuable, not to save a mother and her alien baby that night. The stars seemed colder, distant, uncaring. The two moons rose together, casting shadows across the valley. Alara sat with Vale under the shelter, her head resting on his shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Her hand rested on her belly, and for the first time, the baby moved hard enough for Vale to feel it too. His eyes widened, not with fear, but wonder. He placed his hand gently and closed his eyes, breathing deeply, as if he had touched the future itself. Sudden sound cut the momente signal. Loud and clear, repeating through a drone that floated above the camp, flashing red, a mechanical voice declared, "Unauthorized life form detected. Prepare for extraction. Resistance will be met with force." Vale stood slowly, gripping his blade even though he could barely stand. Alara helped him up and looked him in the eyes. She didn't say anything, but he knew what she was thinking. She wouldn't let them take her child, not while she had breath in her lungs. She raised her weapon, aimed at the drone, and fired. The shot missed the center but struck the wing, sending it spinning, crashing into the rocks. The wreckage burned, lighting up the night, but that light would bring others, bigger and deadlier. Alara turned to Vale, breathless. "We go now," he nodded, and together they grabbed their gear and the last of their supplies. Alara took one final look at the place that had become their home, broken and quiet. Then she turned away, walking into the dark, toward the hidden tunnels below the dome, toward the last safe place left on the planet. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing: the fight was no longer just for survival. It was for the future, for her child, for something new the galaxy had never seen before. The tunnels beneath the dome were darker than Alara remembered. The walls hummed faintly with old energy, like the structure itself was alive but tired. Vale leaned on her shoulder as they walked, his steps slow, his breathing shallow. The bleeding had stopped, but his strength was fading. Every few steps she had to pause and steady him, but he never complained, not once. Their path led deeper underground, where the light from the surface couldn't reach. They passed strange machines still glowing dimly, silent guardians of a forgotten era. Alara's scanner blinked with warnings, old systems reacting to her presence, but not attacking. Instead, the path ahead slowly lit with soft blue lines, guiding them like a whisper in the dark at the heart of the underground maze. They found it again, the stasis pod, glowing faintly. Waiting, Alara placed her hand on the panel, and it opened with a soft hiss, warm mist spilling into the air. She looked down at the small cradle inside, perfectly shaped for a newborn. Her heart ached. Part of her wanted to cry, but there was no time for that now. Above ground, engines roared, and the earth trembled. The enemy had arrived. She ran back to Vale, helping him sit against a smooth wall. He looked at her with calm eyes, eyes that held no fear, only trust. He whispered, "You know what to do." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving you," he smiled, faint but real, and placed a hand over her stomach. "You already carry both of us now." Suddenly, the walls shook hard, lights flickering. The old systems sensed danger, and deep alarms echoed through. The ancient stone. Alara's breath caught as a red glow lit the corner of the Ruman emergency shield system, activating automatically. Meant to protect life at all costs. She understood what the dome wanted her to choose above them. Heavy boots landed. The enemy had entered. The Glamora stood, picked up her rifle, and ran to the upper tunnel. From the shadows, she watched the soldiers' tall, armored faces hidden behind black visors. They moved like machines, searching. Fast, scanning everything. One of them paused and turned toward her. She fired without thinking, the shot echoing through the hall. And the soldier dropped, twitching, but the others turned instantly. She pulled back. Heart pounding. Two more came after her. She ducked behind a stone wall and used the old dome wires as a trap. When the soldier stepped forward, the trap snapped. Sending a burst of old energy through their suits, they collapsed. Smoke rising from their armor. She turned back toward the lower tunnel, but it was too late. More had already found the entrance. They had reached Valor. Ran. Slipping on the floor as she reached the chamber, she saw two soldiers standing near. Vale, weapons drawn. He stood tall despite his wounds, no weapon in his hand, but fire in his eyes. One of the soldiers raised a shock lance and stepped forward. Vale didn't move. But he spoke something in his native tongue. A single word, loud and firm. And then he did something Alara never expected. He slammed his hand into the ancient wall, triggering a fail-safe system buried deep inside the structure. The walls lit up with ancient fire, and a pulse shot outward. The soldiers froze as the energy wrapped around them, locking their suits, disabling their weapons, and dragging them back toward the tunnel like they were made of paper. The chamber sealed behind Alara stared at Vale, tears in her eyes. "You'll die down here," she said. He smiled, and his voice was steady. "Not if you live." She wanted to argue, to refuse to fight him, but she couldn't. She stepped forward and hugged him tightly, feeling his heartbeat one last time. Then she climbed into the stasis pod, holding her belly gently, and let the lid close over her. As the pod sealed, the last thing she saw was Vale standing in the glow of the ancient walls, a guardian of something new, something never seen before. Time slowed inside the pod, her breathing soft, the baby still and safe inside her. Outside, the storm raged. The soldiers screamed, and the old planet fought back. But none of that touched her now, because, deep in the heart of a forgotten world, something impossible had begun. A human mother, an alien father, and a child who could change everything.